Hi, everyone. I hope you had a very safe and happy 4th of July weekend, and I am excited to welcome you to the Northern Kentucky Spotlight Podcast powered by C-Crew. I'm your host, Sarah Brookbank. Today, we have a loaded episode of the podcast for you. First up, Northern Kentucky Chamber President and CEO Brent Cooper joins me to talk about the Northern Kentucky Housing Blueprint and the strategies that the Chamber is supporting to help address the housing shortage in Northern Kentucky. We are also joined by Janet Harrah of NKU's Center for Economic Analysis and Development and Karen Finan of the OneNKY Alliance. They highlight NKU's Midsummer Symposium happening on Thursday, July 17th. Thank you to our podcast sponsors, C-Crew, Google and Amazon advertising experts, and Schneller Knockelman. Local Leaders Regional Change is happening on Tuesday, July 22nd. We have 3 incredible guests lined up for this event: Mayor Ron Washington of Covington, Mayor Julie Metzger-Aubuchon of Florence, and Mayor Eric Haas of Fort Thomas. These mayors will share how our cities are working together to address shared challenges and shape a stronger, more connected Northern Kentucky. You can register at nkychamber.com/events. Now let's go meet our members of the week, hear from our sponsors, and I'll be back with this week's guests.
Ranking on Google Search and Maps is easy to understand, but hard to do. It requires constant effort and attention, uploading new photos, responding to Google reviews, writing weekly posts, and checking suggested updates. Google listing optimization takes experience and time, and there are no shortcuts. C-Crew gives your Google My Business account the steady, consistent attention it needs to be effective, optimizing, updating, and expanding critical content every single week. From local retail stores to large regional networks, C-Crew generates content, establishes benchmarks, and creates dramatic, measurable increases in engagement. So what can C-Crew do for your business? More calls, more clicks, more clients.
Congratulations to our members of the week. You can learn more about these businesses by following the Northern Kentucky Chamber on social media, where we will highlight one of these businesses each day. Now, let's meet our members of the week. Looking for employee mental health support outside of your benefits and EAP? RYTT Solutions, a workplace mental health consultancy, helps small businesses with tailored solutions to support the mental health of their employees. GlobalLink Technologies Corp. Specializes in delivering customized solutions as a leader in IoT-driven technology, offering services in real-time monitoring, temperature mapping and calibration for both regulated and non-regulated industries. Belterra Casino Resort offers over 55,000 square feet of versatile meeting space, along with a luxurious hotel and a variety of resort amenities. Viability, launched by the Cincinnati Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired in 2013, creates professional job opportunities for individuals who've lost their vision later in life. Coalition Forward is a statewide alliance of companies and individuals working together to create employment opportunities for people with disabilities. Hi, everyone. Today I am joined by Brent Cooper, our president and CEO here at the Northern Kentucky Chamber. Brent, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you back on. We are talking housing again. I haven't had you on recently to talk housing, but the Chamber has been doing a lot of moves in the background since the release of the Home for All report earlier this year. This week, we are rolling out the Northern Kentucky Housing Blueprint. It's a new document. It's really exciting. Tell us a little bit about this.
Sure. So just to give us some background, Northern Kentucky identified via this housing study that we were roughly around 6,500, 6,600 homes short of what we really need in Northern Kentucky. That was the initial study that was done. Then we did the Home for All, which identified about 50 different options for ways that our community could come together to help solve the problem. Fast forward to this blueprint. This blueprint is the effort of the Chamber to summarize some of what we think are the most achievable ways out of those 50 things that we can make a difference with. So as I've been saying, we can't eat the elephant all at once. Yeah. We got to take bites at a time. And what are things that we think can have the biggest impact right now over the next year that could really make a difference? So we've boiled down a number of things into 4 focus areas for us, and that's what's in this blueprint.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 4 strategies. These are key things that we really think are going to move the needle here, especially from a business perspective. Yeah. So tell us about these 4 key strategies.
So right off the bat is a regional housing trust fund. We believe that investing in that could have an immediate impact over the course of time here in Northern Kentucky. We're talking over a course of 5 years, an additional 1,000 homes and all kinds of different, housing options, apartments and so forth that our region desperately needs. A second one that we've talked about are pilots, for example, of an employer-assisted housing program. So what could employers do that could make a difference? Very similar, how can we address the missing middle? How can we address housing options in some of our existing communities and maybe adjust some of our rules and regulations to make that happen? And then finally, maybe the biggest is workforce. And if you talk to Brian Miller at the Home Builders, he'll tell you, we've got to get more people in the trades building homes. We got to get them trained. We got to get them in the right positions. How do we do that? And so those are the top 4 areas that we think we can invest in right now.
Yeah, and very important that all of these kind of trace back to that Home for All report that the community worked on. Obviously, the Chamber, Brighton Center, the Northern Kentucky Area Development District, and so many other people bought into these 50 solutions. We're excited to kind of move forward with these 4. I want to dive into each one of those individually because I think it's kind of neat to talk about. You mentioned with a housing fund, a regional housing fund that would be locally controlled. Not only would this help fund the creation of new homes, it's also going to help existing homeowners. Tell us a little bit about this fund.
Yeah, so that fund, and I personally think investing in a fund that could maybe be administered by the Northern Kentucky Catalytic Fund, for example, that probably would be the right mechanism. And we could generate dollars that could be used to help people build apartments, for example, and the Catalytic Fund has done that. Seen a lot of success doing that. I pointed to one in Dayton, for example, Dayton, Kentucky, that saw a new apartment building come out of, it was a building that was not a great building. They've turned it into beautiful apartments and added housing there. That's a perfect example of something that could be done with that. That kind of housing fund could also be used to help people pay for down payments, subsidize that, and change generational wealth, right? If we want to really make an impact in generational wealth, have people own homes too. So it's got to be apartments and home ownership. I think those are 2 things that could come out of a regional housing trust fund. I will also say there is the statewide housing fund that is woefully underfunded, and compared to other states, we're talking other states are investing $70, for example, in a housing trust fund compared to ours where we're about $6. And so I think investing in something like that would also make a big impact.
Yeah, so not just locally, there are statewide solutions
yep.
too. So one of the things, employer-assisted housing, that's really big here at the Chamber. We work with employers every single day. What do you think some of those pilot programs could look like?
Yeah, there's all kinds of different innovative things employers could do. For example, if an employer invested $5 million in housing for their employees, you're talking about housing for 125 employees as an example. They could work with partners like the Brighton Center. They could work with Brighton to help with down payments, help deal with the minutia that comes with the bureaucracy rather that comes with that kind of investment. So the businesses don't have to necessarily get in the weeds, but they could fund others or work with others to help them accomplish those kinds of things. We're looking at employers who are building on-site or very close proximity housing, which would reduce traffic for their workers, would give them better predictability and stability within their workforce. So those are all kinds of things that I think could come out of that particular bucket of activity.
Yeah, and you talk about workforce attraction and retention. If you say, hey, you're here with us for a certain number of years, we'll help you stay here. That's essential.
100%. And employers right now, look, we're already assisting people with tuition, for example. You stay with our company for a year, we'll help you with your tuition reimbursement. This is just another extension of that, I think, another benefit for attracting and retaining talent.
Yeah, and that's what we are all about here at the Chamber of Commerce.
All about it.
And speaking of that workforce, the workforce development, we think that funding that can be really a benefit. Like you mentioned, Brian Miller over the Builders Association, who I've had on the podcast before and who worked on that Home for All report alongside the Chamber. Tell us a little bit about this part of it, because I think a lot of people think that that's probably pretty common sense.
It is, and it's a nationwide challenge. And I should have said that up front. I mean, look, housing is at a crisis point in this country, and it's directly tied to talent. So our businesses say over and over, we need to grow, attract, and retain talent. We've got to have more housing options for people. In order to do that, you got to have the people to build them, and they have to be trained. And we're very proud of the work that's been done at the Ensweiler Institute, as an example. I think the business community as a whole has to find a way to amplify and really direct people, future employees, into the trades, whether that's electricians, plumbers, construction workers, you name it. And I'm very familiar in the IT space as an example. Like, we have to continuously drive people into the trades in order to have the workforce that's necessary. And that's going to take resources and a very intentional effort by our community to regionally encourage people to go into construction as a workforce option.
Yeah, and the last thing in this report, the last strategy, is this missing middle housing and finding different ways to bolster that. That was something that came out really big in that 2023 report, that initial housing study from NKADD. For people that don't know what middle housing, that missing middle housing is, just explain what that is for us.
Yeah, and I think that's confusing for a lot of people. It's a variety of different things that we're pulling from those 50 options, but a couple of examples. Let's say you're in Fort Mitchell or Fort Thomas, and you've got a separate dwelling on your property. Maybe it's a detached garage, maybe it's a pool house, for example, and you want to have housing for your aging parent or for your kid who just graduated from high school or college. It's working with the community, zoning rules, working within the zoning and so forth, to have that as an option. Or in Fort Mitchell and Fort Thomas, I'm just picking on those two because they have a number of these kinds of solutions, where you could have turn a regular home into two homes, or quads, for example, and have different families living within the same community. Those are examples of things that you could do that could really impact the missing middle. So those are topics that we're talking about.
Right, and that's missing middle housing that already exists in our
That's
community.
correct.
You can drive through where I live in Erlanger. On my street, we have 3 different
Same all over
quads
the
and a
place.
bunch of single family homes. So just encouraging more development of that.
And there's ways that we can work with the local zoning to encourage that and make it where everybody feels comfortable. In Louisville, for example, they've identified different standard options for separate dwellings, for example, to make it easier. When you're a homeowner, you don't know the rules that you have to go through to make sure that all the zoning is copacetic and that everything is right. If you have that standard approach that just makes it easy for people, I think it can really make a difference and increase the amount of housing that's available in our community.
Yeah, so these 4 key strategies are things that we're going to be prioritizing throughout the year. And thank you for kind of digging a little deeper into those. So this housing blueprint rolling out this week and into next week, when you think about what some of these next steps are, and having the community get involved with this, what do you think those next steps are?
Well, the good news is we have a steering committee on housing, regional steering committee that's been engaged. The judges, execs, the mayors, a whole bunch of different community stakeholders. You mentioned Brighton Center and the Area Development District, in addition to United Way, and some really what I would call community stakeholders throughout the region. They're all at the table. I think we've got to continue to focus, collectively advocate, work together. That's the one thing Northern Kentucky does well, right? That's our superpower. We find a way to come together and make lasting change. We have to find a way to solve this crisis in our community. This is a supply and demand issue. We don't have enough supply, and it's increasing our costs, right? And so if we want to see lower costs and more people able to find homes for our kids, for our aging parents, for our workers, we have to find a way to do these things and come together. That's the next step, is I think going around having these community conversations and seeing if we can get some meaningful, impactful things at both the state level and regionally. I think if we do that, we're going to come out ahead. And look, make no mistake, we are in a national and international battle for talent. Everybody's struggling with housing right now. If we can figure out a way to make this work, we're going to win. And I'll just lastly say this. What I hear most often when we talk about more jobs and growth is traffic and the hidden costs. I would say back to people, if you want to have lower taxes and more jobs, housing is a big part of the solution, if not the biggest right now. So for example, 40% of those working at CVG, in and around CVG, live in Ohio. If We want them to move over and not have to deal with the traffic that takes getting to their job. Let's build some housing close to the jobs. That will reduce traffic. And I know that's maybe counterintuitive to some people. More housing means more traffic. No, we actually think more housing done the right way in proximity to jobs will actually reduce traffic and increase our quality of life, keep taxes low, and make our economy booming. Our mission at the Chamber is to grow the economy. We can't do that without these housing solutions. That's why we're doing this.
Yeah. Well, Brent, usually I close with what's the final thoughts on this, but I think you absolutely nailed it.
Thank you.
Well, Brent, thanks so much for your time today. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Today on the podcast, I am joined by Harrah of NKU and Finan of the OneNKY Alliance. Ladies, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
It's great to have you. We are talking a little bit about the Midsummer Symposium that NKU is hosting. Janet, can you jump right in and tell us a little bit about this event?
Yes, so it's at the Center for Economic Analysis and Development. We're in the Hale College of Business, and we will be hosting the Midsummer Symposium on July 17th at the NKU Student Union.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really big event. This is your third year that you guys have done it. Tell us a little bit about the topic that you guys are going to be covering this year.
So this year we're looking at industry clusters. One of the questions we get all the time is, what is an industry cluster? It's basically a collection of businesses that have things in common. Mm-hmm. They tend to share the same infrastructure, the same talent pool. Oftentimes they share customers. And I always tell people to think of it as like an economic neighborhood, right? It's a little neighborhood of businesses that when one does well, they all tend to do well. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about what are those economic clusters and neighborhoods that are important to our economy here.
Yeah, and one of the other things we're talking about a little bit is this community roadmap that you guys are working on. Tell us about this initiative and what it means for the community.
Well, I'll just want to start by saying a big thank you to OneNKY Alliance, because they are sponsoring our Midsummer Symposium this year. And so when it comes to the questions around the corridor of, I'm going to let you take that.
Okay, great. Yes. So, and thank you for that question, and thank you for inviting both Janet and I to be here today. We're super excited about the development of a community roadmap. Mm-hmm. This has been in the works for quite a while. Northern Kentucky is great at visioning its future. What do we look like? Where are we going? And over the last several years, there's been a lot of collaboration on knocking down obstacles in front of us from an economic development standpoint, from a population, a housing standpoint. Name an issue, there's a plan out there. Mm-hmm. Through the OneNKY Alliance, we really see the need to create a community roadmap that serves as our North Star. Where are we going in this new phase of growth? You know, for the last 8 to 10 years, a lot of groups have done significant things to advance the community. What does the next 10, 15 years look like? And as we look at the community roadmap, we think about industry sector development, and that's why Janet's research is so important to our efforts. We also looked for guidance from our lead economic development organizations like NKY and READY. They do this day in and day out. But what we really want to understand is who is here, what are they doing, where is the organic growth, and where are we dominant in certain areas of the market? Because we want to be able to take that and really bring it to Northern Kentucky for its next phase of growth. Mm-hmm. So many other elements related to that industry sector growth, as well as a capital strategy. How do we raise the money to support our industry sectors and address community needs like housing, like transportation, like education and health? So many things that all the growth organizations continue to work on.
Yeah, it's very vital. And you mentioned the research that the center is doing there. Tell us a little bit, for people that don't know about this Center for Economic Analysis and Development. Tell us a little bit about the types of research you guys are doing.
So I always tell people we are affectionately called CEAD. It's so much easier to remember. But at the Center for Economic Analysis and Development, we engage in applied economic research in support of the economic development of our region. Mm-hmm. So we're studying the economy, the demographic changes, what helps small businesses as well as large businesses thrive and profit here. We want to not only to maintain the employers we already have, but attract new ones.
Yeah, that's essential. We at the Chamber obviously heavily involved with that. I'm working with NKU and the OneNKY and and the OneNKY Alliance. I need you guys to shorten your names a little bit. But one of the things I think is so important in this region, obviously the organizations you guys are a part of and here at the Chamber, that working together, I know that's a huge part of the OneNKY Alliance and the work that you guys are doing. Tell us what kind of things you're excited about the future, about this roadmap, what you guys are working towards right now.
I mean, this next phase of growth really represents a bold path. And how do we embolden this new phase of growth? How do we work together collaboratively with all the growth orgs, backed by the research from NKU CED, backed by a data-driven strategy that will drive policy and infrastructure needs? And so that's really important that we have a strategy. What I'm excited about, of course, all of us are moving into the OneNKY Center soon with a number of growth organizations. Our partners like NKU will certainly be present, as we move forward. But just bringing everybody together physically under one roof is so symbolic, and I think will really push us forward.
Yeah, I think that is a huge part of it. And pivoting kind of back towards this event that you guys are hosting later on in the summer, tell us a little bit about the panel. So obviously, Janet, you're going to be giving a really great keynote that I'm sure people are going to love and get a lot of insights from. So tell us a little bit about the panel as well.
So we're going to have a panel discussion. Karen has graciously agreed to be our moderator. So we're very excited about that. And then Chad Sumi, who is the managing partner of eGateway Capital in Cincinnati, is going to come and talk about capital strategies in conjunction with the industry clusters that we've identified. And then Larry Crowder, who's the new CEO of CBG, is going to come and talk. And that might be a preview, a little bit of a hint that aviation is important to our future. So we're going to talk a lot about transportation and logistics and how the airport fits into that future for us. So we're very excited to have Larry come and talk as well.
Yeah, and what types of things do you think attendees are going to take away from this event as a whole?
Well, I think a couple of things that we don't normally talk about so much is that we're going to talk very explicitly about where are our strengths when it comes to industries, because we have some very definite competitive advantages in certain industries. And Karen doesn't even know this part yet, but we have gone through, and for each of those target industries that we have identified, we've done an economic impact analysis and said, how big are they? What other jobs in the region are they supporting? And what is their supply chain? What in order for the aviation industry to thrive here, what other support industries do they need to thrive? So there'll be some new things that we haven't talked about a lot.
So some new exciting information coming out of this. So I absolutely love that. So give us the nitty gritty. How do people register and where do people go to get that information?
So you can go to cead.nku.edu, and that's cead.nku.edu. So you can register on our homepage, and it's July 17th from 7:45 to 10 a.m. And we're going to be at the Student Union at NKU.
Okay, great. Well, that makes it very easy.
Yes.
And then before I let you guys go, because I know you are very, very busy ladies here in Northern Kentucky, but when I was walking you back, I was like, it's kind of a star-studded episode of the podcast, having both of you on. For each of your organizations, respectively, what sort of things are you working on right now that you think our viewers and listeners might not know about, but they need to know about?
It's a great question. I mean, and one of the things I definitely want to say why we have this opportunity, Janet's research is going to drive a lot of things. The CED research helps us create a data-driven strategy. And so as we look at our growth organizations, one of the big things we're working on is our October 22nd OneNKY Summit. So this is a gathering of community and business leaders. We'll be in our 8th year. We'll be at CTEC. And we will be utilizing the data to drive some moves forward. The Horizon Fund is also doing their annual program. I believe that's September 25th. And part of this will drive their content as well. So you can see us working collaboratively together, making sure that the organizations who are responsible for implementing are in the front seat of that. We want to work with everyone to push the community together. So I think a number of programs coming up that if people want to get involved, the door is wide open.
And there's some of the industry clusters that we've identified, such as life sciences. In addition to the work we're going to be sharing on July 17th, we're also going to be doing a deeper dive into the labor supply and demand for talent in that sector as well. We're doing that for my president. But so we're doing a lot of research. This is just for step one in this research process.
Yeah.
We'll do lots of other projects around it once we've kind of said, like, this is where we want to try and play and win. So what other information do we need to make sure that we're doing the best job possible?
Yeah. Well, this has been absolutely incredible to have both of you ladies on. Janet, Karen, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Chris Knockelman with Schneller Knockelman Plumbing, Heating, and Air. It's spring now, but before you know it, our ACs are working overtime.
Dave, it's going to be warm soon.
Right now is a good time to get the AC serviced, right?
You can get your AC tuned up for only $59.
So get your $59 tune-up at
SKPHA.com. SKPHA. So if your plumbing and mechanical systems give you trouble, just remember our name. Schneller Knockelman.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed learning more about the Northern Kentucky Housing Blueprint and NKU's Midsummer Symposium. You can learn more about the Northern Kentucky Housing Blueprint and take a look at that full report at nkychamber.com/housing. We encourage you to take a look and figure out what strategies you want to support to help address housing shortages across Northern Kentucky. Thank you to our podcast sponsors, C-Crew, Google and Amazon advertising experts, and Schneller Knockelman. And don't forget to visit nkychamber.com/events to register for Government Forum, Local Leaders, Regional Change happening on July 22nd. Finally, if you are a member who would like to be featured on the podcast, or if you're someone who is interested in joining the Northern Kentucky Chamber as a member, please reach out to Lynn Ablin. And if you're a member who would like to share your workforce strategies and resources on our Talent Strategy Spotlight, please reach out to Nancy Spivey. You can find their contact information on the screen or at our staff directory at nkychamber.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll talk to you guys next week.